am I? Moon landings, yes. Sorry, I'm seeing flashing things in front of me on my screen. I just got distracted there for a second. Suddenly I saw my face pop up, and I don't know why my face popped up on my screen. It's a horrific sight. So also, everything we've been told about the Second World War, who are the instigators, who are the bad guys, everything we've been told is a lie. And when you start looking into it, you start to realize that Churchill played a far bigger role than most of us could have imagined in the aggressions and the crime and the unbelievable, inhumane activity that was committed during the Second World War. Churchill seems to be the real villain, and not necessarily the people that everyone has been pointing fingers at. Remember, history is written by the victors, and they can write the history books whichever way they choose to. And this is how it's been all along. And the victors, as you may know by now, are the global elite and the royal bloodlines that have been holding us hostage, enslaving us as humanity for so many thousands of years. But now we're waking up, and we're starting to understand this enslavement on so many levels. So it seems to me that if all the most recent events, from the 9/11, from the moon landing, from the wars, the Second World War, the First World War, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Iraqi War, all these recent events, down to the Napoleonic Wars, to the ancient wars, what we actually know and don't know about Alexander the Great, how great he was for invading the world and killing and maiming and destroying people, how everything seems to be a false flag and manufactured and told by those who control the printing press, who control the media, who control the word of mouth of their time. And in ancient times, it was a certain group of people that controlled the knowledge and information that went out, and that knowledge and information was spread to the lands and to the people in the form and the way that they spread information in their day. In the 30s and the 40s, information was spread in a certain way, through mostly radio. Then television came in, and suddenly television became the voice and the instrument of spreading information. Newspapers, obviously, since the turn of the century and before that already, newspapers were a main carrier of information and disinformation and a propaganda tool for those who control the printing press. So you realize that everything we've been told is a lie. Everything seems to have been stacked for thousands of years to keep eroding the truth and keep growing the lie, so much so that we don't even have the foggiest idea what the truth may be or how far away from the truth we are. Because the best way to tell a lie, as you may or may not know, is to stick as close to the truth, but weave in some very shady information. That then makes it very difficult to distinguish the truth from the lies. But sometimes the lies can be so big that we simply cannot believe that it's a lie. And that was the Goebbels propaganda machine. And just like the United States government propaganda machine is all about, the lies are so huge that people simply cannot believe it. I mean, 9/11, there's still people in the USA that believe that a bunch of Arabs hijacked some planes and flew them into the towers. It's insane. They do no research. They simply buy and swallow what they've been fed by the media. So, now that we know that everything is a lie, it's quite possible that pretty much everything we've been told throughout our whole human history was a manufactured event to create a certain result, to have a certain result so they could then manipulate the people into doing certain things. And NASA are one of the biggest liars. The more you start studying NASA, you realize how they lie about pretty much everything. It is unbelievable. One of the greatest deceptions is that most of us believe that a picture of planet Earth has been taken from space. Well, to my horror, I realized quite recently that that is actually a lie. Not a single picture has ever been taken of planet Earth from space. This might come as a shock and horror to many people, but this is the absolute truth. It's called the blue marble, and the blue marble has gone through various stages. The first one taken in 1972, which is the most popular and the famous one, with Southern Africa, strangely enough, right at the center point. And the blue marble has taken on many shapes. And this is the guy that actually created the blue marble, a guy called Robert Simon. And he very proudly talks on his YouTube clips how he was given the task to create the perfect image of the ball Earth, of the planet, by using compilations of low Earth orbit images and compiling them together to create a complete image of what the Earth would look like from space. Okay? If you don't know this, please go and do your research, because now we're getting into the biggest lie of them all about NASA's space exploration and what's been going on right under our noses. And we're so dazzled and amazed by the lies because they're so big. We cannot imagine that somebody could possibly put together something so large and the lie that has been perpetuated on such a grand scale. So blue marble, Robert Simon, the creator of the image of our planet, which is a lie. This is one of the great examples that are often used, the difference between the blue marble in 2012 and then a year later in 2013, where you can see on the left the shape and size of the United States that takes up pretty much half of the world. And on the right-hand side, a year later, the United States has suddenly shrunk to be about half of the size it was a year before. Same, apparently, a picture from space. Right. If you believe that, you'll believe anything. And this is how NASA gets away with it. What I found fascinating, even when I watched the full 1.5 hours of the Apollo 11 1969 launch, what came to mind is the many thoughts I've had watching numerous launches of space shuttles and other rockets and other, satellite rockets that apparently take satellites into space and so forth. You never ever see a rocket go straight up into the sky. Surely the shortest way from Earth into space is straight up into the sky, not on some weird trajectory. And even in the Apollo 1969 footage, what I found absolutely shocking is that within about 3 minutes of the launch, Apollo 11 is not flying up into the sky. It's flying horizontally, and it's about 102 miles high. In fact, Apollo 11 never went higher than 102 miles into that part of our atmosphere, or mesosphere, or stratosphere, whatever it is called at that altitude. And they've got all kinds of reasons and very complicated technical and mathematical formulas that they bring you, which is all lies and BS, just to confuse those that don't have enough knowledge and information. And most people don't have enough knowledge and information. And this is why we buy all their BS all the time. We just swallow it up. So what I found is that the trajectory of pretty much all the rockets and shuttles launched by NASA are very, very strange. They never go up. It's always this weird trajectory. And then within 3 minutes, let me tell you, of the launch of Apollo 11, within 3 minutes, the rocket was too far to be picked up by cameras. So what they then do, they switch to animation mode, and the rest of the world watch the entire Apollo mission and the moon landing in animation mode. That was the original Apollo moon landing. We watched a bloody animation of the event. And then they switch over to Pinewood Studios in England, where all the scenes on the moon were shot by Stanley Kubrick, and this is what was broadcast to us. That is how big the lie is. The entire moon landing thing has been an ongoing lie. Obviously, we don't mention the Van Allen belts, which are deadly radiation belts that start at about 1,000 miles high and go to, I think, about 3,000 or 6,000 miles. Radiation belts that go around planet Earth that no one or no thing can go through. It's like going through a lethal giant microwave. It'll fry you in seconds. And yet in 1969, 3 guys in a little tin can went to the moon through the Van Allen belts and returned safely to look very happy, like they've just been down, you know, from LA to New York and back, and say, well, what a great trip we had. It's all lies. So this brings us to where this whole thing of our ball Earth, like NASA has been showing us, the blue marble, where that all started. And it's fascinating because it actually only started in 1543 with this guy called Copernicus. Prior to that, pretty much all ancient cultures believed that the Earth was flat. They all speak about a flat Earth. Even the ancient Greek philosophers talk about flat Earths. And this is really important stuff to digest, people. Copernicus is a well-known Freemason. Now I'm going into some deep conspiracy in some people's minds and opinions, but this is not conspiracy. This is just simply facts and information. You can call it what you want. Copernicus was the instigator that was used by the elite to propose this new heliocentric model where the sun is at the center. Prior to this, everybody believed for millennia and millennia that the sun moved around the earth. The sun and the moon moved around the earth and not the earth moving around the sun. Copernicus changed all that. Obviously, the Catholic Church was not happy with that. Isn't it interesting that the Catholic Church in those days was not happy with that, and yet today they're promoting a whole new ball earth philosophy. Then about 60 years later comes along this guy called Galileo Galilei, who takes this thing to a whole nother level. He makes this little puny little telescope that is a lot weaker than most of the powerful binoculars today, or camera lenses that can give you, 60 times magnification and 100 times magnification. And Galileo Galilei miraculously sees the moons of Jupiter with his little telescope that magnifies only 30 times. And suddenly the whole heliocentric and a ball earth philosophy gets even more entrenched. And there it is. In fact, when you start doing a research, you find very little evidence, and I watched some interesting documentaries on this, that the earth is actually moving. And this was a shock to me, I must tell you. This was an absolute shock to me when very recently I watched a documentary. In fact, I posted it on my Facebook page because it blew my mind so much, where all the most current, recent scientists from all the universities, from Mika Koku, who you often see, all claiming that there is no real scientific evidence that the earth is moving through space. Do with that information what you want. I'm going to carry on here. Then around 1680, this guy comes along, Isaac Newton, and suddenly, we all know he was a very advanced Freemason as well. It's very important to keep tabs on this, people. All these instigators of new ideas and thoughts throughout pretty much all of human history are all renowned Freemasons, especially in the last 1,000 years. Okay. Or especially in the last 500 years, should I say. So Isaac Newton comes along, and suddenly he brings this idea of gravity to us. And remember that this is an observation that he made, and suddenly gravity becomes a new force, something that we observe but we cannot explain. And it seems that it was all perfectly stacked new ideas to promote a whole new concept of a ball earth, where previously nobody cared about gravity because everybody knew the earth was flat. So suddenly you start seeing the evolution of the idea and the thought. And if you're new to this, keep your mind open, because I'm going to share some interesting things with you that are very easily explained. So gravity is this something that we observe, and when you ask any scientist or any astronomer, any mathematician, any physicist today to explain what gravity is and how it works. It cannot be explained. This was another thing that really blows your mind when you realize how little we know about something that we just take for granted and believe someone that wrote a whole bunch of rules and laws about this thing called gravity, this new force. Well, you'll find that all the things that we've covered, sound that gives rise to sound and resonance that give rise to magnetism, moving magnetic fields that give rise to electricity, and the manifestation of all matter and all everything in creation out of sound and resonance, and therefore everything has a magnetic capacity to it, because everything comes out of sound and resonance creates magnetic fields. Therefore, it is a lot easier to explain gravity, what gravity actually is with the understanding of sound and magnetism. Remember that your heart has its own electromagnetic field around it. The way that the blood moves through our veins makes a sound, and that sound that the blood makes as it moves through your veins, as it spirals through your veins, that sound creates a magnetic field and an electromagnetic field in our body that extends beyond our body. And then you got to ask yourself, what makes your heart beat? You know, and when you go to medical school, or when I studied pharmaceutics, they teach you all this nonsensical garbage as to why your heart beats. It's all these nonsensical ideas that actually have no scientific backup. Your heart beats because it's connected to the primordial source frequency, the source code, the sound of creation. That's what makes your heart beat. And that same sound that makes your heart beat creates the electromagnetic fields around our bodies. And now we start to understand what gravity most likely is. It's another magnetic effect. Sound manifests matter, creates magnetic fields that create electricity and the electromagnetic universe. Everything is affected by sound and magneticism, sound and resonance and magneticism, or magnetic fields. And especially us, we are connected to everything. Our hearts are connected to the source code, the sound frequency of the Creator, the sound frequency of creation itself that make our hearts beat, that create the gravity, that create the sound and magneticism through our hearts, the electromagnetic field around us. And therefore, it is a lot easier to say that gravity is a consequence of sound and magneticism and the magneto-electric universe, and not the electromagnetic universe, as it's often called. So it is just getting more and more exciting for us to get into the heart of this information. And at this note, we have to throw the elephant into the room, and the most exciting debate that I've ever come across that has emerged over the last 2 to 3 years and has exploded around the world. And many people just do not want to go there, but we have to keep our minds open and discuss this. The flat earth versus the ball earth versus the flat earth, or vice versa. So remember, everything we've been told is a lie. Throughout ancient times, we've been exposed to lies and deceptions, hidden in plain sight, in ancient carvings, in ancient murals, in ancient pictures. The walls, the ceilings, and the floors of ancient churches and temples are filled with advanced knowledge of sound, resonance, magneticism, and beyond. Hollywood has taken that role on today to expose the truths to us and hide it in plain sight. Many of you know this already. This is not news to anyone. Some of the best examples, as you know, are the movie The Matrix, that we are actually in a matrix. We have measured that. We have measured, Paul Cravenstein and many others have measured the energy fields around the earth, or up in the sky, should we say. Let's not say around the earth. Let's say the energy fields up in the sky, because we always look up at the sky. And obviously the Wizard of Oz, the Wizard of Gold, follow the yellow brick road that leads to the Wizard of Oz, the Wizard of Gold. He who controls the gold controls the world. And so they explain and expose this knowledge and information to us, always hidden in plain sight. And this is what I find absolutely fascinating. The Truman Show is another one of those hidden in plain sight. The whole TV show was broadcast from the world's largest stage, film stage ever constructed, this giant dome, that this make-believe reality and this make-believe life of an entire town in the Truman Show was broadcast to the outside world. And sooner or later, Truman discovered that he was in a show, that he was not free, that he was under a dome, and that there was a way out. I find it fascinating that in recent times we have a book by Stephen King that's called Under the Dome. And that book was then turned into a TV show. What's fascinating, by the way, if you look at that picture under the dome, look at that picture right sort of at the top, and you see some interesting patterns forming there. It looks like water or light shimmering on the surface of water, right? And this is Under the Dome, the TV show, the TV series. And this brings us to the maps of the world of ancient cultures. And we realize that ancient scripture in pretty much all ancient civilizations talk about this flat earth and this firmament in the sky that was created by God or the Creator. It talks about how God creates the heavens and the earth, and how God then puts the firmament in the sky to separate the waters of the heavens from the waters of the earth. And the more you read the scriptures, I must add, the more this reality becomes more and more real. How we completely misunderstood the scriptures and how we've been manipulated into believing something that may not be so. This is a spectacular example of the firmament in the sky, and you see the stars, the moon, and the sun is inside the firmament. And there's a guy at the bottom sticking his head out of the firmament, looking out what's beyond the firmament. And that remains the interesting question, because we know that there's this energetic grid up in the sky. We've discussed this. We've measured it. We know it's there. So what is outside that energy grid? And here's this guy, the bottom left, looking out of this firmament or the energy grid in the sky that even the Anunnaki talk about, or the Sumerian clay tablets talk about. And he's looking up at outside our reality, and what he sees remains an interesting discussion. I'm not going to go there right now, but that really looks interesting. And you could almost, if you start reading Ezekiel, the images there might resemble something like Ezekiel describes in the Bible. And so let's look at some of the other ancient civilizations and how they depict the sky and the earth. And this is the Inca world, the Inca planet, flat earth, and the firmament around it. Here we have the Mayan firmament above the sky with the sun and the moon and the stars and the flat earth underneath it. And notice that the flat earth doesn't stop where the earth is. It actually goes and continues as a spherical form, a spherical shape underneath. And here we have a Navajo Indian firmament and the shape of the world, again, from this dome, the firmament above the sky, to and going underneath. And we suddenly realize that this on the left here we have an ancient Hebrew understanding of the world and our reality, and the waters above the firmament, waters of the heavens, and the sun and the moon being inside the firmament, and then the earth and what's underneath the earth, and the great deep, all one giant big sphere. And suddenly we realize that this model of a flat earth in the center with a firmament at the top and the continuation of the spherical sphere underneath is very similar to the images on the right, as you can see, of the double torus that brings energy from the top and the bottom and then expels the matter and energy at the equator, right? And suddenly we have a much better understanding how it is possible that the Earth could actually, in fact, be flat on the surface because of the sound resonance and the magnetic fields, and even the electron model that I showed earlier, the electron model that I should put in here, that actually shows us exactly this kind of manifestation of energy and matter at the equator. And I'm not going to go into this. This is going to be for another presentation. What's fascinating even more is the fact that the United Nations map actually shows the flat Earth map the same way as being promoted by the Flat Earth movement and those doing the research in that area. What's even more fascinating that in January 1907, on the front page of the Hawaiian Gazette, and I think also in the Honolulu News, they featured this ancient map that was found in Tibet and then brought to Honolulu, or brought to Hawaii, and they published this map of an ancient world showing the flat Earth map, and outside the Antarctic wall, which is outside of the flat Earth map, we see dozens of giant pieces of land. So this really poses a question. What's going on here? Who is lying and who's telling the truth here? Admiral Richard E. Byrd, who became one of United States' most celebrated explorers, and in an interview in 1953, I believe, he clearly talks. He was called the most famous explorer in American history. He was one of the few people, if not the only one, that crossed the North Pole and led an expedition. He was also a promoter of the whole hollow earth or Agartha principle. He actually claims that he somehow entered another world, another realm that seems to be inside the earth, which he couldn't explain. And then Admiral Byrd also did a major Antarctica expedition with planes and ships and a huge team of people. He had several expeditions to Antarctica, which you can go and do your own research. And then in 1953, I believe it was 1953, that he did this interview on one of the major television networks in the USA, where he very openly states that on the other side of Antarctica, now I'm not sure how you get to the other side of Antarctica, but on the other side of Antarctica, there are vast unexplored lands never seen by any human that are much larger than the United States. These are his words. You can go and watch his entire interview on YouTube that was recently released. Admiral Byrd, one of the most celebrated explorers in the United States history. And that really tells us that there's stuff going on beyond Antarctica that we don't know. And this is why Antarctica is a no-go zone. And the Antarctic Treaty was signed by all the major countries in the world. No one can own it. Nothing can happen there. And a number of countries have stations there that do apparently experiments and research in Antarctica. But before we finish this debate on the flat Earth or the ball Earth, I went into this about 2 years ago. It came to my attention. I ignored it for the first year, just like most people do. I just thought this whole flat Earth movement was a bunch of nonsense by a bunch of ignorant people that are just trying to distract us from reality and what's going on. Just another distraction, and I thought there was possibly an infiltration by the elite to just confuse us. And then a year later, I started looking at it more seriously, and I thought, let me explore what these guys are saying. Let me see if there's any merit to what they say. So I was looking for some undeniable, irrefutable scientific facts that I could hook myself into. And I found that in the very simple realization that there is no curvature. And this simply blew my mind. So I urge you, those that are really struggling with this flat Earth thing, the ball Earth versus the flat Earth, go out there, do some research, and look at the curvature issue. This is the most important scientific, irrefutable fact that will hopefully launch you on a more detailed journey of research. And this is a view from Michigan City to Chicago across Lake Michigan. That view across there, I believe, is about 40 miles. Well, 40 miles across the lake, Chicago should be completely invisible. If you use the mathematical formula to calculate the curvature of the Earth, the curvature of the so-called horizon, beyond which ships disappear on the ocean, which is absolute nonsense, and you'll see why when you start to research this, we should not be able to see Chicago at all. Maybe the top of that tallest tower will possibly be seen, because from 40 miles away, that Chicago should be about 1,060 miles, 1,060 feet below the horizon based on the curvature. The formula to calculate the curvature of the Earth, of the horizon, is 8 times distance in miles squared. Okay, if you don't know this, remember this. If you do research, you'll find it very quickly. 8 times distance in miles squared. So this is 40 miles. So 40 times 40 is 1,600. So it'll be 8 times 1,600, and you get the answer in inches. Do those numbers, and you'll see it's impossible to see Chicago from Michigan City if the Earth was a ball, and therefore there is no curvature. No curvature from any height. As you know, I've done a lot of flying around the world, and no matter what height you are in an aeroplane, the horizon always rises up to meet you at halfway down, halfway up in the sky. The horizon is always at eye level. And there is simply no curvature. I do this every time I fly. I pick up one of the menus or something in the pocket in front of you, and I put it up against the window, and you can see it's as flat as possible. Here is another example. This Dinyang Bridge in China. It's 102 miles long. In 102 miles, there should be curvature of 6,900 feet. So from the one side to the other, you should not even be able to see the other side, and yet you do very, very clearly. The more you go and do your research, the more you realize that you can see across vast, flat water space and see people walking on the beach where you should not be able to see them. So the only conclusion we can reach is the fact that you can see that there is no curvature. Here's one of the greatest researchers of our time, Auguste Piccard. Very few people know about him until you start doing this research, and you realize that the commander of the spaceship Enterprise in Star Trek is called Auguste Piccard, after this particular explorer, French explorer in 1931, that went up into space in his hot air balloon. He still holds the world record of going highest in his hot air balloon. I believe he went up something like 15 miles, or was it 16 kilometers high, or 56 kilometers. I'm sorry, I speak under correction now. And when he came back, they thought he got lost in space. And when he came back after 48 hours or so, obviously he became a highly celebrated individual. And in his description that was printed in Popular Science in 1931, he states very clearly that from up there, the Earth seemed a flat disk with upturned edges. No talk of any curvature. Well, we have the physical evidence, the photographs. There is no curvature. And we're getting to the end of this presentation, which I've really enjoyed putting together, because it brought into connectedness all the areas of knowledge of information, from science, from history, religion, ancient civilizations, tools and artifacts, cone-shaped tools, resonance, everything, including the flat Earth and the lies and deceptions of NASA. The fact that there's no curvature, people, and there is no curvature, please go and do this research for yourself. That means only one thing, that we cannot be living on a ball Earth. That's the only conclusion we can reach. So that is now the conclusion that I've reached, because I have found no curvature. The scientists of today very clearly tell us that there is no real scientific evidence, just conjecture and suggestions. No scientific evidence that the Earth is actually moving through space. There's a lot more to this, a lot more. But once you open this door, just like any other door that opens the door to the rabbit hole, you will find information that'll blow your mind. It will shake the foundations of everything you've been told, because it truly is the biggest lie we've been told, is the cover-up of the shape of the world we live on. And I believe that our understanding of sound and magnetic fields, as I've showed you, and how the torus shapes and the torus effect actually works, of sound, matter, and magnetic effects, how that actually promotes the existence of a flat earth, of a flat piece of matter, of soil, of earth with water on it, that is surrounded by an energetic field above and below. The sound, resonance, and the toroidal shape studies suggest that far more seriously than anything else. I hope this has given you some thought and insight, is that the flat earth thing is not just some crazy idea, some crazy people that want to distract us, but the fact that it actually affects everything. Our religion, our history, our science, our physics, our astronomy, our cosmology, and it now becomes the biggest lie that we've been told. So this brings us to the end of this presentation. It was more than 2 hours. It was 2.5 hours. I want to thank you for hanging around, and for apologizing for yesterday when we couldn't do this because of the power failure. The technology and the energy, the free energy, let us down. And I look forward to exploring this more, connecting more of these dots, and sharing more information. I have a lot more where this comes from, a lot more information, a lot more ideas, and as I say, the dots that are connecting. And I believe that our exploration of the stone circles of Southern Africa and what we find and measuring the energies are going to give us a lot more knowledge and a lot more understanding of what's really going on here. So I hope you enjoyed this, and have a beautiful day or a beautiful night, all depending where you are. And I'll catch you again very soon. I want to remind you that I'll be going to Brazil the first 2 weeks of December to have meetings with the Ubuntu team there, and meeting with several mayors that have already embraced the Ubuntu philosophy and our plan for one small town, that already want to implement this in Brazil. So I'll be meeting with at least one mayor and probably another 20 or 30 mayors that want to embrace and implement our one small town philosophy. That will change the world. So until later and further and the next time, have a good day and a good night.